But first of all, we just want to start with that breaking news that just came out of the White House in the last half an hour or so, this time from the First Lady, Melania Trump. She made a surprise on-camera statement to deny unspecified allegations involving her and the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes, Mrs. Trump has denied ever having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein or his accomplice, also convicted Ghislaine Maxwell, and she described the rumours surrounding her relationship with Epstein as defamatory.
Now, in a moment, we'll be speaking to our White House reporter, Bernd Boozman, who was in the room to hear that statement from the First Lady. But first of all, let's listen back to it in full now.
The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation.
All right, people, welcome back to Dr. John Podcast. Recent documented communications from Melania Trump reveal a more complicated relationship and political dynamic than public narratives suggest. However, claims that Trump is fuming remain speculative, and lip-reading clips circulating online are inherently unreliable, with error rates estimated at 30, 60% or higher, so the full picture requires cautious interpretation. I want to be really clear about this, because it matters for how we understand this story. I'm treating the lip-reading clips as entertainment and tabloid content whose interpretations are inherently uncertain rather than as documented speech evidence. Treating professional lip-reading interpretations as documented quotes would be a specific sourcing error that responsible coverage avoids.
I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence. My polite reply to her email doesn't amount to anything more than a trivial note. I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998.
The clips are visually compelling and they're fascinating to watch, but they are not reliable documentation of what was actually said. With those two calibrations firmly in place, here's what is actually documented through credible sourcing. First, Melania issued an April 2026 White House statement blasting what she called lies linking her to Jeffrey Epstein. She insisted she never had a relationship with Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell. She never visited Epstein's island or flew on his plane. Her only contact was casual correspondence and a trivial note replying to a Maxwell email. Those are her documented official public denials of specific alleged connections.
This initial encounter with my husband is documented in a detail in my book, Melania. The first time I crossed paths with Epstein was in the year 2000 at an event Donald and I attended together. At the time, I had never met Epstein and had no knowledge of his criminal undertakings. Numerous fake images and statements about Epstein and me have been circulating on social media for years now. Be cautious about what you believe. These images and stories are completely false. I'm not a witness or a named witness in connection with any of Epstein's crimes. My name has never appeared in court documents, depositions, victim statements, or FBI interviews surrounding the Epstein matter.
But here's where it gets really interesting. She also called on Congress to hold public hearings centered on Epstein's victims, giving each woman the chance to testify under oath and permanently entering their stories into the congressional record. That's a primary source document from the White House official briefings and statements page. It's not a secondhand account or a tabloid report. It's Melania's own words in an official White House statement. And the call for congressional hearings where victims testify under oath is specifically significant because it comes from within the Trump administration. It's the First Lady's documented official public position on congressional Epstein accountability. Second, former press secretary Stephanie Grisham displayed a text exchange at the 2024 Democratic National Convention.
I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims. I was never involved in any capacity. I was not a participant, was never on Epstein's plane, and never visited his private island. I have never been legally accused or convinced of a crime in connection with Epstein's sex trafficking, abuse of minors, and other repulsive behavior. The false smears about me from mean-spirited and politically motivated individuals and entities looking to cause damage to my good name, to gain financially and climb politically, must stop. My attorneys and I have fought these unfounded and baseless lies with success and will continue to maintain my sound reputation without hesitation. To date, several individuals and companies have been legally obligated to publicly apologize and retract their lies about me, such as Daily Beast, James Carville, and HarperCollins, UK.
Documenting that she had asked Melania during January 6th whether she wanted to tweet about no violence and peaceful protest, and Melania replied with a single word, no. Grisham is a former Trump White House press secretary and former Melania Trump chief of staff. Her identity gives her access to the communication chain she's describing. She publicly displayed the exchange at the DNC, meaning she made a documented public disclosure of a specific text communication. Yahoo Canada News and other outlets covered Grisham's DNC appearance documenting the text exchange. The accountability significance of that no reply is the context. During the January 6th Capitol attack, Melania's former chief of staff asked whether the First Lady wanted to publicly oppose the mob's violence, and the documented response was a single word, no. That's a documented refusal to publicly oppose violence against the Capitol. Whether that documented refusal reflects agreement with the mob, disengagement from political events, or some other motivation is an interpretive question that the no answer creates rather than resolves. Third, Trump issued a February 2024 Valentine's Day campaign email titled, "I love you, Melania." The email thanked Melania for staying through every single indictment, arrest, and witch hunt. It used the message to solicit donations from supporters. The Hill and The Guardian both documented this fundraising email. The email's dual character, personal love letter framing combined with fundraising solicitation is documented evidence that Trump's public expressions of Melania's loyalty are embedded in his political fundraising infrastructure rather than existing as purely personal communications. The after every single indictment, arrest, and witch hunt formulation is a documented public characterization of their relationship in legally self-serving terms, positioning Melania's continued presence in the relationship as evidence of Trump's innocence and victimhood rather than as a personal commitment independent of his legal situation. Now let me be really clear about what these three documented elements mean and don't mean. The January 6th text through Grisham, the April 2026 Epstein congressional hearing statement, and the Valentine's Day fundraising email are all real and documented. Whether they constitute ominous messages depends on editorial interpretation that the documented evidence does not require to make the accountability story significant. The White House Epstein statement's congressional hearings for victims call is specifically significant in the documented Epstein accountability context on its own documented terms, without needing the ominous message characterization to make it accountable. The April 2026 White House Epstein statement is specifically the most significant documented element here. It connects directly to the Epstein accountability thread we've built across multiple scripts. Melania's official White House statement explicitly calling on Congress to hold public hearings for Epstein's victims, give each woman the chance to testify under oath, and permanently enter their stories into the congressional record to uncover the truth. That's the most specific documented congressional accountability demand made from within the Trump administration on the Epstein subject. That demand came from the sitting First Lady in an official White House statement. This is happening at the same period we've been documenting Trump's own Epstein file accountability pressures, including the discharge petition and his very foolish, misguided Republican warning. We covered in the Epstein trap script how Democrats organized a discharge petition to force a broader Epstein document release vote. Trump warned Republicans that only a very foolish or misguided Republican would fall into that trap. Melania's official White House call for congressional hearings where each victim testifies under oath is the administration's own official White House position on congressional Epstein accountability from the First Lady's office. That creates a documented public position from within the White House that is more aligned with the Democratic discharge petition's transparency and victim testimony goals than with Trump's own very foolish trap characterization of congressional Epstein engagement. That documented internal tension, Trump calling congressional Epstein activity a trap, while Melania's official White House statement calls for congressional hearings, is the specific accountability finding this story most directly documents. Two positions from the same administration, one from the president calling congressional Epstein engagement a trap, one from the First Lady calling for congressional Epstein hearings where victims testify under oath. Both are documented, both are real, and the tension between them is significant. End of Section 1. Section 2. Let me walk you through each of these documented elements in more detail, because understanding the full context of each one is essential for understanding why this story matters. The January 6th no text has the most specific and most credibly documented sourcing chain of the private communications elements. Stephanie Grisham displayed a text exchange at the 2024 Democratic National Convention, in which she described asking Melania during the January 6th Capitol attack whether she wanted to tweet about no violence and peaceful protest, and Melania replied with a single word: no. Grisham is a former Trump White House press secretary and former Melania Trump chief of staff. Her identity gives her access to the communication chain she's describing. She publicly displayed the exchange at the DNC, meaning she made a documented public disclosure of a specific text communication. The accountability significance of the no reply is the context. The January 6th Capitol attack, in which Melania's former chief of staff asked whether the First Lady wanted to publicly oppose the mob's violence. And the documented response was no. Yahoo Canada News and other outlets covered Grisham's DNC appearance, documenting the text exchange. The disclosure's accuracy depends on Grisham's credibility as a witness. She left the Trump administration and has been publicly critical of Trump and Melania. That's the source context that Grisham's own political trajectory creates around her DNC appearance testimony. Grisham served as White House press secretary, the most senior communications official in the executive branch, and later as Melania Trump's chief of staff. She left the White House on January 6th itself and documented opposition to what was happening at the Capitol. She subsequently wrote a memoir, I'll Take Your Questions Now, that documented her White House experience and was publicly critical of both Trump and Melania. Her DNC appearance and no text display in 2024 is the most recent documented instance of her public Trump critical activity. That full trajectory, senior Trump administration official who resigned on January 6th, subsequent memoir, critical of Trump and Melania, DNC appearance displaying the no text, is the specific documented source context that makes Grisham simultaneously a credible primary source with direct access to the communication she described, and a source with documented motivations that the Trump side would characterize as adversarial. Both dimensions of that documented context need to be held simultaneously for responsible coverage of her January 6th testimony. The April 2026 White House Melania Epstein statement is the most specifically credible of all the documented elements because it is a primary source document from the White House official briefings and statements page, rather than a second-hand account or tabloid report. Melania's documented statement makes 3 specific claims and 1 specific call to action. The claims she never had a relationship with Epstein or Maxwell. She never visited Epstein's island or flew on his plane. Her only contact was casual correspondence and a trivial note replying to a Maxwell email. Those are her documented official public denials of specific alleged connections. The call to action is where this gets really significant. Congress should hold public hearings centered on Epstein's victims, giving each woman the chance to testify under oath and permanently entering their stories into the congressional record. That's the specific, documented congressional accountability demand that gives the statement its most significant accountability character in the context of the Epstein series. The Melania congressional hearings call is specifically significant in the Epstein context because it comes from within the Trump administration from the official White House and calls for the specific oversight mechanism, congressional hearings, that the Epstein discharge petition is also trying to activate through a different procedural pathway. We covered in the Epstein Trap script how Democrats organized a discharge petition to force a broader Epstein document release vote, and Trump warned Republicans that only a very foolish or misguided Republican would fall into that trap. Melania's official White House call for congressional hearings where each victim testifies under oath is the administration's own official White House position on congressional Epstein accountability from the First Lady's office. That creates a documented public position from within the White House that is more aligned with the Democratic discharge petition's transparency and victim testimony goals than with Trump's own very foolish trap characterization of congressional Epstein engagement. That documented internal tension, Trump calling congressional Epstein activity a trap, while Melania's official White House statement calls for congressional hearings, is the specific accountability finding the Epstein statement most directly documents. Both positions exist in the documented public record from approximately the same period, spring 2026. They represent different documented White House communications about congressional engagement with the Epstein subject. Whether the administration views those 2 positions as compatible, Trump warning against partisan congressional Epstein dynamics, while Melania advocates for victim-centered congressional hearings, or whether they reflect a genuine documented difference in posture on the congressional Epstein engagement question, is the interpretive question whose resolution requires more documentation than the available primary sources alone provide. What the primary sources establish is that both positions exist. Both are documented from official or public Trump administration sources, and their specific language points in different documented directions on the question of whether congressional engagement with the Epstein subject is a trap or a transparency opportunity. That's a significant tension that deserves honest acknowledgement. The Valentine's Day 2024 campaign email is the 3rd documented element. Its specific character as a documented personal devotion plus fundraising pitch combination gives it its accountability significance. The Hill and The Guardian documented the February 2024 Trump campaign email titled, "I love you, Melania." The email thanked Melania for never leaving his side after every single indictment, arrest, and witch hunt, and used the message to solicit donations from supporters. The email's dual character, personal love letter framing combined with fundraising solicitation, is documented evidence that Trump's public expressions of Melania's loyalty are embedded in his political fundraising infrastructure rather than existing as purely personal communications. The "after every single indictment, arrest, and witch hunt" formulation is a documented public characterization of their relationship in the most legally self-serving available terms. It positions Melania's continued presence in the relationship as evidence of Trump's innocence and victimhood, rather than as a personal commitment independent of his legal situation. It's a political message dressed in personal language, using Melania's loyalty as a fundraising tool and as a narrative device to reinforce the claim that all the legal troubles are politically motivated attacks attacks. Now, to give the complete and fair picture, Trump and Melania supporters have arguments about the 3 documented elements that deserve acknowledgement. They would argue that Grisham's January 6th no account reflects a disgruntled former employee's selective presentation, and that Melania's no may have reflected a view that tweet-based responses during an active crisis were inappropriate rather than indifference to the violence. They would argue that Melania's Epstein congressional hearings call reflects her genuine advocacy for victims' voices rather than any conflict with Trump, and that the 2 White House positions are compatible. Trump warning against political trap dynamics while Melania advocates for victim testimony. And they would argue that the Valentine's Day fundraising email reflects Trump's characteristic style of personalizing political communication rather than being a specifically revealing accountability document. End of Section 2. Section 3. These are real arguments. Grisham's credibility is complicated by her public break with Trump. The congressional hearings call can be framed as compatible with Trump's position. The fundraising email style reflects normal Trump campaign communication. These deserve acknowledgement. But here's what those arguments run into when you apply them to the documented record. The Grisham DNC display of the text exchange is a documented public disclosure rather than a verbal characterization. She displayed the exchange publicly, creating a specific accountability record that is more robust than a verbal account alone. The Melania congressional hearings call, issued from the official White House briefings page, calling for victims to testify under oath before Congress, is specifically different from Trump's documented, very foolish trap characterization of the same congressional Epstein engagement space. Treating both White House positions as simply compatible requires explaining the specific documented language difference between calling congressional Epstein activity a trap and calling for congressional Epstein hearings in the same period. The Valentine's Day fundraiser emails specific after every single indictment, arrest, and witch hunt formulation is documented language that places Melania's loyalty specifically in the legal accountability context, which is its specific accountability significance, regardless of the campaign communication style it reflects. The lip-reading clips deserve their own dedicated treatment because they are the most visually vivid of the brief elements while being the least reliable as documentation of speech. The Mirror UK report, based on professional lip reader Jeremy Freeman, described several claimed Melania statements. Donald, look left, you should go and do it, just say it and leave it. And during a Marine One exchange, Donald, look at me. The Times of India and Express UK similarly cover lip-reading interpretations from state visit moments. I want to be specific about why professional lip-reading is inherently uncertain for the purposes of responsible accountability journalism. Lip-reading depends on visible lip movements, which are inherently ambiguous because many different sounds produce similar lip shapes. Professional lip readers themselves document significant error rates. Even under optimal conditions with full face visibility, good lighting, and slow speech, error rates can exceed 30 to 40%. In real-world conditions with partial visibility, motion blur, camera angles, and natural speech patterns, error rates are higher. Treating professional lip-reading interpretations as documented quotes about what specific words were spoken is a sourcing error. The interpreter is providing their best assessment of ambiguous visual information, rather than documenting speech that was audibly recorded and transcribed. The lip-reading clips are entertainment content, visually compelling but documentarily unreliable. I note their existence and their interpretations, while explicitly declining to treat them as documented quotes. That leaves us with a documented accountability picture. The January 6th no text through Grisham's DNC testimony, the April 2026 White House Epstein statement with its congressional hearings call, and the Valentine's Day fundraising email, each document a specific moment where the documented Melania communication or statement creates a specific accountability observation. The no text during January 6th, Grisham credibility noted. The Epstein congressional hearings call in an official White House statement. The I love you after every indictment fundraising email's dual character. 3 documented elements without the lip-reading speculation, without the Trump fumes characterization, and without the ominous message framing. Let me be really clear about what the 3 documented Melania elements mean as a combined accountability picture, with the lip-reading and fumes calibrations firmly maintained throughout. The first thing to understand is why the April 2026 White House Epstein statement is specifically the most significant of the 3 documented elements, and why its congressional hearings call is the most consequential specific accountability finding. We've been building the Epstein accountability thread throughout this series. The 23,000-page Oversight Committee email release, the discharge petition organizing, Trump's very foolish, misguided Republican warning, the Blanche non-compliance documentation, and the NPR documented 50 missing pages. All of those documented threads involve Democratic congressional pressure for more Epstein accountability and Trump's documented resistance to that pressure through the very foolish trap characterization. Melania's official White House statement calling for congressional hearings where victims testify under oath issued from the White House briefings page is the First Lady's documented official public position on congressional Epstein accountability. That position is documented as more aligned with the transparency and testimony goals of Democratic oversight pressure than with Trump's own documented, very foolish characterization of congressional Epstein engagement. The documented internal tension between those 2 White House positions, Trump calling congressional Epstein activity a trap and Melania calling for congressional Epstein hearings, is the most specific accountability finding this brief documents. The second layer worth sitting with is the January 6th no text and the specific credibility context of Grisham as the source. Grisham is a documented former Trump White House official who has become a Trump critic. She left the administration and has publicly discussed her disillusionment with both Trump and Melania. That documented political trajectory creates a specific credibility context, a source with documented reasons to present her former employer unfavorably who is making a specific claim about a specific documented communication. The no text's accountability significance depends on whether Grisham's account is accurate. The DNC display of the text exchange is more documentable than a verbal account alone because displaying the exchange publicly is a disclosure whose accuracy she is staking her public credibility on. What the text documents, if Grisham's account is accurate, is that Melania declined to publicly oppose January 6th violence at the specific moment Grisham asked her to. Whether that documented refusal reflects agreement with the mob, disengagement from political events, or some other motivation is the interpretive question the no answer creates rather than resolves. The third layer is the Valentine's Day fundraising email and what it documents about how Trump's public expressions of Melania's loyalty function in the political accountability context. The "I love you after every indictment, arrest, and witch hunt" formulation is the documented characterization that most directly reveals the political accountability framework within which Trump embeds expressions of spousal loyalty. Thanking a spouse for staying through indictments and arrests in a fundraising email to political supporters is documenting the relationship's loyalty, specifically in the legal accountability context rather than in a purely personal register. The fundraising function, the political support solicitation dimension using the Melania stayed through indictments loyalty narrative to generate donor contributions, is the documented commercial political use of the spousal loyalty story. That combination, legally contextualized spousal devotion expression embedded in a political fundraising solicitation, is the documented character of the Valentine's Day email, whose significance The Hill and The Guardian both captured. What all of this adds up to is a documented accountability picture that is both significant and complicated. The no text from January 6th, the Epstein hearings call from the White House, the Valentine's Day fundraising email, each of these documents something real about Melania Trump's public positioning and her relationship to the administration's accountability challenges. The lip-reading clips are fascinating but unreliable. The Trump fumes characterization is speculation. But the documented elements themselves, the official statements, the displayed text, text, the fundraising email, those are real and they tell a story that matters. The internal tension between Trump's very foolish trap characterization of congressional Epstein engagement and Melania's official call for congressional Epstein hearings is particularly significant. It suggests a documented difference in posture within the administration on how to handle Epstein accountability. Whether that difference represents a genuine policy disagreement, a strategic division, or simply different communications from different offices addressing different audiences is a question that the available documentation doesn't fully answer, but the tension itself is documented and significant. The January 6th no text similarly raises questions that the available documentation doesn't fully resolve. Why did Melania decline to publicly oppose the violence? Was it because she agreed with the mob? Because she was disengaged from the moment? Because she thought tweet-based responses were inappropriate? The no answer documents a refusal, but not a motivation. That ambiguity is part of the accountability story, not a reason to dismiss it. And the Valentine's Day email documents how Melania's loyalty is being used as a political asset, a fundraising tool, and a narrative device to reinforce the claim that Trump's legal troubles are politically motivated attacks. Whether Melania consented to that use, whether she was even aware of it, is another question the documentation doesn't fully resolve. But the existence of that use is documented and significant. So here's the bottom line on all of this. Stephanie Grisham displayed a text exchange at the 2024 DNC documenting Melania's one-word response when asked during January 6th whether she wanted to tweet against violence. Melania issued an official April 2026 White House Epstein statement denying any relationship with Epstein or Maxwell and calling on Congress to hold public hearings centered on Epstein's victims, with each woman testifying under oath. Trump issued a February 2024 Valentine's Day fundraising email, thanking Melania for staying through every indictment and arrest and using it to solicit donor contributions. The lip-reading clips are entertainment content whose inherent unreliability as speech documentation I apply explicitly rather than treating the interpretations as documented quotes. The Trump FUMES headline characterization has no documented sourcing basis. 3 documented elements, 2 of which have credible mainstream sourcing, and 1 of which is a primary source document from the White House itself, are the accountable story. The documented comparison between the 2 simultaneously existing White House positions on congressional Epstein engagement deserves explicit mapping because it is the most specific documented tension this brief identifies. Trump's very foolish, misguided Republican warning characterized congressional Epstein engagement as a trap that only foolish Republicans would fall into. Melania's White House Epstein statement called for Congress to hold public hearings, give victims the opportunity to testify under oath, and permanently enter their testimony into the congressional record. Both positions exist in the documented public record from approximately the same period. They represent different documented White House communications about congressional engagement with the Epstein subject. Whether the administration views those 2 positions as compatible or whether they reflect a genuine documented difference in posture is the interpretive question whose resolution requires more documentation than the available primary sources alone provide. What the primary sources establish is that both positions exist. Both are documented from official or public Trump administration sources, and their specific language points in different documented directions on the question of whether congressional engagement with the Epstein subject is a trap or a transparency opportunity. That's the accountability story, and it's as significant as any dramatic framing can convey.